Welcome into the Flagship Podcast. I am Chip Brown of Horns247.com, joined by the managing editor of Horns 24/7, Taylor Estes. And Taylor, we got a lot to talk about in today's Flagship Podcast. We've got our recap of spring football, first week of spring football, and of course the Big 12 tournament champion Texas Longhorns. Will be the number 2 seed in the Midwest region. Tricky draw for the Longhorns that first weekend, but a lot of experts picking the Longhorns to reach the Final Four in Houston. And so a lot of excitement around the program on a day where Chris Beard accepts the head coaching job at Ole Miss. So we invite everyone in to join us here live on the Horns 24/7 YouTube channel with your questions, your comments about the first week of spring football for the Longhorns, the NCAA Tournament brackets for both the men and the women. The women a 4 seed in something called the Seattle 4 region, where Stanford is the number 1 seed. Vic Schaefer's team losing to Iowa State in the Big 12 tournament final on Sunday. He said they just couldn't make shots. But Taylor, it's a loaded show.
Yeah, definitely. So be sure to, if you have any questions about spring practice, about the NCAA tournament, or whatever is on your mind, feel free to post your question or just comments in the comment section on both YouTube or the Horns 24/7 Facebook channel. But Chip, you were at the you were at the Big 12 tournament in Kansas City later in the week last week. You were able to kind of witness this, and on I think it was yesterday, was it, that you wrote a story about Rodney Terry and his possibility of maybe being named the head coach of Texas basketball. I think that's a good place to start, because I think with Chris Beard especially accepting the job at Ole Miss this week, I think, what's going to happen for Texas men's basketball in the head coach position that's going to be open this year. What is the latest that you can share with the audience?
Yeah, so after Texas wins the Big 12 tournament by blowing out Kansas by 20, second straight blowout of Kansas in 8 days. I talked to sources and, I said Rodney Terry is his consideration growing to become the permanent head coach at Texas. And the answer was a resounding yes, but no final decision has been made. The quote was one step at a time. So Chris Del Conte has been pretty steadfast, as well as higher ups at UT, that a final decision will come after the season, meaning after the NCAA tournament. But Rodney Terry certainly helped his case with his team's performance in the Big 12 tournament, because they had to beat Oklahoma State, who's one of the best defensive teams in the country. And then they had to, beat TCU, a team I think is a really dangerous team in the NCAA tournament because of their length, because they have different ways to score. And then Texas takes down Kansas in the championship in Kansas City. I mean, Taylor, if I tell you that the T-Mobile Center was 90% Kansas fans and a sprinkling of burnt orange, that's exactly what it was. And for Dylan Dizu to play the way he did those 3 games, averaging 18 points, 6 rebounds, he shot 70%. He got in foul trouble in the championship game, had to sit, only played 6 minutes in the first half, picked up his 3rd foul with 15 minutes left, had to sit. It didn't matter. Whenever he came back into games, he picked up right where he left off, was just magnificent. And I think that's why so many experts are picking Texas to reach the Final Four, because that was the big question mark about Texas. Where are they at the 5 position? Where are they at center? What can they count on? because you've sort of had Dylan Dizu and Christian Bishop rotating through that position. But Dylan Dizu was a man in that Big 12 tournament. And if he continues this run, then watch out, because it was funny after the win over Oklahoma State, he came to the press conference. We don't get to talk to players unless they get brought to post-game press conferences. So I asked him, have you made any decision about whether you'll come back for your COVID-19 season? And he's like, no, I'm just trying to focus on, the here and now. And then it was almost like he took offense to my question, and just started lighting it up, because he was the most outstanding player in the tournament. And Marcus Carr and Sir'Jabari Rice also named to the Big 12 tournament team. But just a fantastic week for the Longhorns. And what a scene. I mean, cutting down the nets, the players chanting RT, RT, Rodney Terry telling me yesterday that, look, it's not about me right now, but I do think, my coaching has spoken for itself, and that it is his intention to continue his journey as a head coach, meaning if he doesn't get the head coaching job at Texas, he'd like to be a head coach somewhere. So, lots of excitement heading into this NCAA tournament with the way the Longhorns are playing.
Yeah, and I feel like, he doesn't even have to really do much of an interview process, regardless of where he would be a head coach, because just turn on the tape right now. I mean, it's not that Texas, just beat Kansas to win the Big 12 tournament in basically what was pretty much a home game for Kansas. They dominated. I mean, 20-point win in the Big 12 tournament, championship game, back-to-back dominating performances against Kansas. And, I think we kind of hit on this a few weeks ago. Regardless of who he's coaching for, Rodney Terry certainly is going to be a head coach in college basketball next season. And, I feel like I'm curious for your take on this. If the experts are right and Texas were to make it to the Final Four, they have to hire him as the head coach, right? I mean, they've only made it to the Final Four, once in program history? I mean, I feel like that would be just such a massive slap in the face if only the second time in program history you make it to the Final Four and you don't, you have an interim coach and you don't name him head coach. That would be ludicrous, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think a trip to the Final Four absolutely secures the job for Rodney Terry. And the question is, anything short of that, does he have to make it to the Sweet 16? Does he need to make it to the Elite Eight? Texas is a number 2 seed. By seeding, they should reach the Elite Eight, but we know how difficult this tournament can be. And I see a question here from CTE 11. Thoughts on the seeding and the potential second round game matchup with A&M. How about the first round matchup with Colgate? Colgate leads the nation, leads all of college basketball in 3-point shooting percentage at 40.8. So that's a team that's going to spread you out, and you better be on point defensively, because if those threes start falling for Colgate, then that's your worst case scenario. Now Texas is way more athletic. They're a much better defensive team, but when you've got 4 players for Colgate who can hit the three, that's a good test for a first round game. And then as CTE 11 points out, if Texas gets by Colgate, they would face the winner of Texas A&M and Penn State. And you can argue both of those teams were underseeded. I mean, A&M finished second in the regular season and in the SEC tournament in the SEC, which, has the number 1 overall seed, Alabama. And A&M, has beaten Alabama. Penn State is a team that can spread you out and has one. They shoot the three like crazy. All 5 of their starters shoot the three, and they have one of the most difficult matchups in the tournament in Jalen Pickett, who averages 17 points a game, almost 7 rebounds a game, 6 assists a game. He's a 6'4" guard who just does it all. And again, Penn State, a team that makes 10 threes a game. They attempt 27 threes a game. If the threes are falling for Penn State, like they were in the Big Ten tournament, Penn State just got to the final of the Big Ten tournament. I mean, it's like, wow. I look at some of those other 7-10 matchups, and Texas definitely got probably the most difficult of if Texas gets through its first round game. Not anything that Texas can't handle, but A&M is a lot like TCU. TCU beat Texas during the regular season, and Penn State's a lot like Baylor, and Baylor beat Texas during the regular season. So, Texas is going to have to be on point, just like they were at the Big 12 tournament. They're going to have to continue that level of intensity, that level of commitment to their defensive principles. And it all starts Thursday, 6:25 in Des Moines, where Texas will open NCAA tournament play. And it'll be fun to watch, because Texas is certainly capable, with all their veteran experience, of going deep in this tournament.
Yeah, I see this question here from Ben G from the Horns 24/7 YouTube channel. What are the names you are hearing with potential candidates to replace Terry if we part ways with him? Have you heard any names, Chip?
Yeah, I mean, I know the names that were of interest when Chris Beard was hired.
Mm-hmm.
And, it was Eric Musselman, who's now at Arkansas. It was Nate Oates, who's now at Alabama. Tony Bennett at Virginia. And so, I doubt that the names have changed that much. And
Yeah, I mean, we're 2 years removed from when Chris Beard, less than 2 years removed from
right,
when he was hired.
right. So, Texas tends to go for the home run, hire the made man, someone who's proven they can get to a championship, like Chris Beard got to the national championship game. Eric Musselman, Nate Oates are guys who have shown they can go deep in the NCAA tournament. Tony Bennett beat Chris Beard for the national championship when Virginia beat Texas Tech in 2019. So, it's going to be interesting, because Texas has undoubtedly done its vetting, back channel look at some of these coaches. And they're going to be watching Rodney Terry. They're going to be watching those coaches in the NCAA tournament, whether it's those names I mentioned or another name. And so that's why, the quote, "one step at a time." We'll see how the NCAA tournament plays out. How about Shaka Smart and Marquette as a number 2 seed in this tournament? And, Rick Barnes, a 4 seed at Tennessee. So all kinds of Texas connections, Texas X's in this NCAA tournament, which is always just so much fun, especially the first weekend.
Yeah, I mean, this is like I've never hidden the fact that I'm not the biggest basketball fan, but this is the basketball that I really enjoy. It's just so fun. Even I think the, basic fans can get into it. There is a question from Raymond Smith from the Horns 24/7 Facebook page. Timmy Allen availability. As we know, he sat out of the I keep saying that, the Big 12 tournament. What's the latest on him, Chip?
Yeah, so he had a calf strain, and they've been really careful with it. He said if it was an NCAA tournament game, he said after the first round of the Big 12 tournament, he would play. So I think Timmy Allen is going to be ready to go. They've been, treating that injury aggressively so that he would be ready, and to sit him all through the Big 12 tournament was difficult for Timmy Allen, but it was the right thing to do, to have him ready for the NCAA tournament. And he's a guy who's a Swiss Army knife, who gives you all kinds of, he gives you the little plays, and he's one of their best one-on-one, operators offensively. They like to get him on the wing down low and let him work one-on-one. He's got a nice move to the basket, a counter move, and they're going to need him. What was amazing, Taylor, about that win over Kansas in the championship game at the Big 12 tournament was how much every player contributed. I mean, even Arterio Morris coming in off the bench for Tyrese Hunter, they combined to defend DeJuan Harris. Kansas is 21-0, or they were 21-0 when DeJuan Harris scores 6 points. So Tyrese Hunter face guarded DeJuan Harris. When he got a breather, Arterio Morris came in and defended DeJuan Harris, and they held him to 1 of 5 shooting 2 points until Texas had an 18-point lead with 2 minutes and 45 seconds left. Then Harris hit a couple of layups, and so they're now 21-1 when DeJuan Harris scores 6 points because of the job that Hunter and Harris did, or Hunter and Morris did, and Arterio Morris, had steals for breakaway layups and or dunks, and had the best alley-oop dunk from Serge Rice in the tournament. And he's playing with a ton of confidence right now. So all your players just finished on a high note, just got a taste of, success. Their confidence tanks are full. I don't see any reason why that would change before Thursday, but Timmy Allen, he should be back.
Yeah. And especially with how veteran this team is. I mean, it's a rarity, I feel like, especially in college basketball, where you have very few freshmen that are in a position where they have to contribute, substantially. Texas is a really old veteran team. I mean, they've got seniors, graduate players, you name it, all across the roster.
5 fifth-year seniors.
Yeah. I mean, that's wild. You just don't come across that really in basketball with, even with Texas in the past. I feel like that's been a very rare situation where Texas has ever been in, to be honest. And so this is going to be interesting to see.
And with the transfer portal, we are seeing it more. Like Penn State starts 4 grad students. So 4 fifth-year seniors and a 4th-year senior. I mean, that's why that Penn State team is just, when they're hitting threes, they're dangerous. They're scary. And so, one of the best matchups of the first round is going to be that Texas A&M Penn State matchup, because A&M, they lead the nation in free throw attempts. They do a great job of attacking the basket, getting fouled, going to the free throw line, making free throws. They shoot 76% from the foul line and attempt 27 free throws per game. That's a ton. And so they have a very clear identity. They're going to be going downhill toward the basket. Penn State's going to spread you out and try to hit, find that open three. And so it's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be a difficult challenge. And of course, Texas is in the same region with Houston, which got strong consideration for the number 1 overall seed, but ends up as the number 2 number 1 seed. And they would go to Kansas City to play in the Sweet 16 and Elite 8 to get to Houston for the Final Four. And Kelvin Sampson and the Houston Cougars are trying to get home to play for it all as a number 1 seed. So Texas has a tough path to throughout this tournament, but it's going to be fun to watch because they're playing at a high level right now.
Yeah, and James E. McGee Sr. from the Horse 24/7 Facebook channel said, will a first round win only be enough for Rodney Terry to get the head coaching job?
I mean, we don't know, because if there are other candidates in the tournament and they, show that their expertise or their, whatever Texas is looking for in its next head coach, if they show more of that in the postseason after the Shaka Smart experience, which was up and down and all over the place and never resulted in a single NCAA tournament win, then, the powers that be could decide to try and bring in someone who's had more success in the NCAA tournament than Rodney Terry. But there's no doubt that this team is playing hard for him. They're doing exactly what Rodney Terry has asked of them, and this coaching staff. I think it's not just Rodney Terry. They have former head coaches on that staff with Chris Ogden and Bob Donewalt that is, they're working well together, and they're doing a great job of scouting opponents. They're coming up with great game plans. Players are executing. And so if you're Texas, you almost want to make sure, if you're hiring Rodney Terry, that whole staff stays together, because it's a rock solid staff with a ton of head coaching experience.
Yeah, and I like this comment here from Tempest Duro. Pardon me if I butchered that, but Arterio Morris and Dylan Mitchell developing and playing well now at the end of the year is a great sign for Coach Terry. And I think that's true because, if you look at it from a surface level, people could look at the roster and say, oh, well, he took over a veteran roster where he already had built relationships. Like, this is Chris Beard's team. But when guys are continuing to develop later on in the season, that's not Chris Beard. That's definitely on Rodney Terry and this coaching staff that's currently in place, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I think that's accurate. And, I see, some folks saying, Benji saying Terry should have been playing Morris more weeks ago. And I agree with that, but you also have to stick with the guys who've gotten you there. And Marcus Carr was going through a bit of a slump. It was really weird. Tyrese Hunter had struggled a lot of the year. He had injuries. He told me in Kansas City that he had a wrist injury. He had the cramping earlier in the year. Then he had a wrist injury. Now he's healthy and he's playing at a really high level. As his game improved, Marcus Carr's dropped. Well, Carr, about halfway through the Kansas game, found it. I mean, he started, it was a driving layup and he got fouled. He missed the free throw, but from that point on, he made 5 straight shots. He was hitting threes. He was hitting the fadeaways. He was hitting everything, and he played great, made the all-tournament team. And if you give up on Marcus Carr, who's first team All Big 12, and play Arterio Morris more, you risk losing Marcus Carr. So you just tell Arterio Morris, I need you to be ready. I need you to be ready. And the great thing is his defense has improved light years. I mean, he was not a defender at the beginning of the year. In fact, Dylan Mitchell could learn a few things from Arterio Morris. Dylan Mitchell's a really good, glass eater and a guy who can score around the bucket, but needs to be a more physical defender against, bigger players, needs to watch some film of PJ Tucker, the former Longhorn, who used to defend way bigger guys at 6'5" because he was just so determined. And so, but you're right. The improvement of Arterio Morris has happened all season long, and that credit deserves to go to Rodney Terry and his coaching staff.
Yeah, no doubt about it. All right. Do you want to touch on some football? You want to stick with some basketball? What are you thinking here?
Well, I think we can touch on some football here, and then let's we can always bounce back to questions about basketball. But Taylor, I think one of the newsier nuggets from toward the end of the week, you heard Steve Sarkisian talk about Malik Murphy, the backup quarterback who was standing and watching a lot of the first week of spring practice, but it sounds like he's on the mend.
Yeah, so Texas has had 3 practices of spring football so far. They're off this week for spring break. However, in the first 3 practices, the media was allowed to be out there for various portions of it, and Malik Murphy was fully dressed up, but was not going through any of the drills or anything. Steve Sarkisian, kind of lumped him in to the injured player list following Monday's practice, the first practice of spring ball. Didn't really give much insight as to what has happened with him. But on Friday, after the practice before Texas started spring break, he did say that Malik Murphy had a little bit of a setback with his injury that he has been, coming on the mend from his high school his senior year of high school in the final game before he was an early enrollee last year. Malik Murphy, it's not anything substantial. It doesn't sound like. Steve Sarkisian said during spring break. So this week, Malik Murphy is actually sticking around in Austin to do some extra rehab on his ankle to get back to hopefully be ready to go through practice when Texas returns following spring break. So that's big news, because I think, if you've listened to the Flagship podcast this offseason, Chip and I have talked a lot about, everybody wants to hear about the Arch Manning, Quinn Ewers quarterback battle, quote unquote. Really, Malik Murphy is the second string quarterback behind Quinn Ewers right now. Steve Sarkisian all but said that, he would be getting second team reps essentially now if he was not injured in the first week of practice. So Malik Murphy, developing is humongous for Texas, because as most teams know, you're one injury away, right? Quarterbacks suffer injuries all the time and backups have to come in. And so Malik Murphy being in the system for a full year, yes, he did not play, for in any of the games last season, but he has been, in the meeting room, been in the film room, has learned the offense, the playbook during his true freshman season. I think him coming back will be huge, honestly, Chip, for the quarterback position, and also, could probably take a little bit of the pressure off of all of this Arch Manning talk too, because this is a true freshman that came in, was intending to redshirt this year, and so I know the headlines are all about Quinn versus Arch. It really should be about Quinn versus Malik and where Malik is at in his development process right now.
Yeah. And it's been a tough road for Malik Murphy so far with the, he had to recover from the broken ankle in the state championship game in December, right before he enrolled at Texas last year in January as an early enrollee. Then he has the scooter accident, injures his wrist. I'm told that this latest injury is an injury that he suffered, somewhat recently, and then was a re-aggravation of it. And, we're not getting any details about it from Steve Sarkisian, but, he's a big guy. He's a big, strong guy. And for him to be, battling these injuries, he just needs to get healthy and build that confidence, because it's tough. You want to grow at your position, and when you're getting in and then you're stopping, and then you're getting in and then you're stopping, it's tough. And he is a specimen, so everybody wants to see what this guy can do. He's a pocket passer. I see some, VY Junior comments. He is not VY Junior. You're not going to see him running zone read and now he could take off and run. He's certainly capable of that, but his first inclination and in this offense and in Steve Sarkisian's plan for him is to be that pocket quarterback who can zip it all over the place with that cannon arm. So it is going to be fun to watch him develop. And I've said, this is a guy who needs to be a Longhorn for 4 years. They need him to grow into something, a top end player who can win games in the SEC, because it's hard enough to keep two talented quarterbacks on a roster at once, but the championship teams have been able to do it. And we certainly saw that last year in the Big 12 with Will Howard at Kansas State, with Max Duggan at TCU. You've got to have two. Hudson Card last year.
Yeah, I would say Texas went through it. Yeah.
Beating West Virginia, probably played his best game as a Longhorn in his last game as a Longhorn. So, that's what we need to see for Texas, because, they have had some recent examples of needing two. Sam Ehlinger and Shane Buechele. Shane Buechele came in and won big games against Baylor and Iowa State when Ehlinger was hurt. You've got to have two. And obviously everyone's like, well, Chip, they have Arch Manning. You don't want to have to play the first year guy. We saw that last year. It's tough. And Steve Sarkisian has said, I don't like playing first year guys. Well, Malik even though he, didn't play, he is a second year guy. He's been in this offense. He knows what he's looking for. And that's, it's his time now to be the backup this year and grow in that position.
Yeah, and the thing too with him is his his ceiling is really high, and as Chip said, I mean, this guy is a specimen. Like we were in the interview room waiting for Steve Sarkisian to come for his interview after Friday's practice, and some of the players walked through the room to go to the locker room, and Malik Murphy is like maybe 6 inches away from having to duck to walk into the door, like into doors. Literally, I mean, this guy is all of 6'6". That they shows that he is. I mean, he's a big kid, but from a development standpoint, even in high school, he had the really, really high ceiling, had a really talented arm, powerful arm, but he was raw. He then with COVID in 2020, with high school football in California not playing, that set him back a little bit more. So this is a guy that, the time's now for him, I feel like, Chip. And from everything that we've heard, he's fully bought in at this point. Doesn't appear to be any type of transfer portal threat that we know of or that we've heard of. And usually we do hear those type of things, especially if a guy is not really getting much attention or, reps in practice or anything like that. It doesn't seem like he's that. He loves Texas. He's a voice in the locker room. Steve Sarkisian's even talked about him being, a guy that players listen to, in the locker room. And that's special for him to be, going into a redshirt freshman season and already kind of having a voice and a say in the locker room. So the sooner that he gets back into the mix, the better Texas for, both from a leadership standpoint, but just also on offense too, because he's got to also push Quinn Ewers, and I think that he has the ceiling and the upside to really do so.
Yeah. And that personality part of it is really interesting because he's been called the mayor of the Texas locker room. I'm talking about Malik Murphy, just a huge personality. In that way, he might be a little bit like Vince Young. He does not lack confidence and presence, and he's big enough, tall enough at 6'6" to stare those offensive linemen eyeball to eyeball, and have some good banter. So it's gonna be fun to watch this guy develop. I really, I hope he does develop. And as I've said, he's not going to be a guy who like Jaquindon Jackson who's going to transfer and go play running back somewhere else. This guy's a quarterback, and he really needs to develop at Texas, get on the field, show what he can do. He loves Austin. I talked to his quarterbacks coach from California recently. There's no hint of disenchantment or anything from Malik Murphy. He loves Texas, and now he just needs to, stay healthy and grow as a football player.
And stay off of scooters, guys. Come on.
Yeah,
You're
stay off
too
the
valuable. Yeah. We have some questions
This,
here, Chip, about the running back room. Want to touch on some of those?
yeah, let's see. Cisco Diaz, how's the running back position looking? Who seems to have the edge at being the starter? Right now it's tricky because you got Jonathan Brooks out recovering from hernia surgery, and all the running backs have looked good. I mean, Jaden Blue, CJ Baxter, the true freshman, the top running back in the 2023 recruiting class, and even, of course, Keelan Robinson. We've seen Keelan Robinson. And he was singled out as an emerging leader by Steve Sarkisian, the Alabama transfer who's been in Sark's offense for a while now. But even Savion Red, I mean, this is a guy who's very intriguing. I don't know how quickly he can get comfortable at the running back position in all facets, meaning blitz pickup, all the protections and everything that he needs to learn. He is certainly lethal catching the football out of the backfield. He has got wiggle, but he's also over 200 pounds, and he's built like a running back. We said that last year when he came in. He's built a little bit like Quan Cosby's thick. He's, but this is a kid who loves football, and I have a feeling he's going to be on a fast track and has that kind of Deebo Samuel type of ability as a receiver / what they call a wide back. receiver slash running back. And we know Steve Sarkisian loves, players with versatility and how he can hide them, try to confuse the defense. Are they a running back? Are they a receiver? Trying to get matchups against, individual defenders. And so I'm really intrigued to watch Savion Red develop because, he's a much bigger guy than Keelan Robinson. Robinson is a slight guy. Savion Red's over 200 pounds, and it's natural. I mean, he carries it really well. So I don't know that you could say there's a favorite right now. I think that's going to end up being decided in fall camp once Jonathan Brooks is fully healthy. But I'll say this, CJ Baxter, everything I'm hearing is everything they've put on him, he's handled, and he's hungry for more. He's a sponge. He's learning. And so don't be surprised, because that kid, he's 6'1", 220. He's special, and he can catch the football. So I think Texas is going to be really talented at running back. We'll see how quickly they can handle, top of the line defenses. No greater example than Alabama in week 2. So that, but there's a lot of talent there that's pushing each other.
Yeah, it is. And one thing Steve Sarkisian, he has pointed to the fact that he has always had a 1,000-yard rusher ever since he's been calling plays at the college level. And on Friday, he kind of touched on, was asked about Jaden Blue and just the overall look of the running back room. And he had said, he's like, hopefully the hope would be that one guy in that group emerges to be the kind of lead back. But he said he would also be okay if it's kind of a running back by committee type of running game that Texas has to put on the field. But he seems sold for sure on all of these guys. And the addition of Savion Red, as Chip said, I mean, this kid, I remember in fall camp last year, Chip kept saying over and over again, like 17, that looks like a linebacker. It looks like a linebacker. It's like, no, he's a receiver. But, he does. He's a thicker body, maybe kind of a similar body to like a Malcolm Brown, maybe would be a good comparison. I think Malcolm Brown may have been a little bit bigger than him, but yeah, I mean, this room's really talented, and it's really gonna be hard, I think, to replace entirely the production that Bijan Robinson and Roshan Johnson brought to the offense over the last 2 years, mainly, especially. But I, as big of a losses as those two were, I still think that Texas running game is in a good place, and having Tashard Choice in that room. I mean, if you read the Insider a few weeks back when Chip had talked to Cedric Baxter's high school coach, we had him on the Flagship Podcast too. But Tashard Choice was huge and very, very instrumental in getting CJ Baxter to commit to Texas, stick with Texas. Getting a kid out of Florida to go to Texas is not always the easiest task, honestly, when you have Florida and Florida State in the backyard there. But Tashard Choice really is kind of becoming a superstar assistant coach, I think, for Texas, both in developing players and also in recruiting, Chip.
Yeah. And I reported that he turned down the LA Rams running back coaching position to stay at Texas. He's going to get a nice raise out of that. But, he's already got Texas in position with the number 1 running back in the 2024 recruiting class. So, yeah, Tashard Choice has been a beast and is a really valuable member of this staff. And I think he's excited about what this Texas team can do, and wanted to help see it through with some of these young, talented backs that he's been bringing to campus, helping to bring to campus. So that's a position that has a ton of upside, and I can't wait to see how that battle plays out once Jonathan Brooks is back and healthy in fall camp. But there's a lot of developing going on right now that is only going to contribute to that battle once we get to fall camp.
Yeah, for sure. And when Stan Drayton took over as the head coach at Temple, right? He went to Temple.
Yep.
Yeah, that was a guy that was like, oh man, how are you going to replace Stan Drayton? He's been so good at Texas. Well, Steve Sarkisian did a fantastic job of replacing him. And I think that had you asked us when Stan Drayton left, if there's going to be somebody that could come in and continue to replicate the production from the running back room and in recruiting, I think I probably would have said no. You can't find a Stan Drayton 2.0. But I think Steve Sarkisian has found that, and Tashard Choice, and it's really good that he's keeping him on staff. With the NFL offer too. There's a question here, CTE11 saying any names surprising early in camp. One thing I will say, he didn't say anything by name specifically, but Steve Sarkisian was asked, what he feels best about, maybe some concerns he may have after the first week of spring practice. And he all but said it's a little bit too early to really start pointing people out as who's like surprising. But he did point to both lines of scrimmage being something that he feels very, very good about, both with the offensive line and the defensive line. And in talking about the defensive line, he said it's a little surprising because you lose guys like Moro Ojimo and Keandre Coburn, who had been, a lot, tons of contributing to like the defense. I mean, they were both 4 or 5 year guys, but he still feels really good about the defensive line at this point in fall camp. And I think that's huge, Chip. Like, you've got to develop O-line and D-line. You win games, you lose games in the trenches. And the fact that Texas returns all of the offensive line from last year, plus, has a defensive line with a ton of talent, that in itself is, I think, a really key development and probably one of the biggest stories to come out of the first week of spring practice.
Yeah, and Barron Sorrell is the guy they need to take the next step as a pass rusher. Steve Sarkisian mentioned him as a leader, and that's big because Sorrell has the length, he's got the frame. I think he has the want to. He's just got to believe that he can mess with guys, that he can line up and beat guys. He's got to pick the right moves. He's got that kind of ability. And so that's a player you're definitely watching. And then, on the other end, that the jack position where Ovia Gofu has moved on, you've got a runway full of players trying to get in on that position. And I've mentioned Jet Bush as a guy who's hungry and a veteran and probably has earned the coach's trust a little bit more than some of those young up and comers, like, Justice Finkley, Jamon Tapp, Teray Bledsoe, all those guys who are making that push. And so, it's early, it's spring ball. This is the time last year where the coaches were ripping into Jatavian Sanders. Remember?
Mm-hmm.
Jeff Banks just took him to the woodshed and said, you gotta be way further than this. You got to be better than this. And Jatavian Sanders said, man, he really got into me. And from that point forward, the bar graph started going straight up. So, they're getting a good look at these guys. But you're right, Taylor. I mean, Alfred Collins, Vernon Broughton. We know Tavondre Sweat. We know Byron Murphy. And Vernon Broughton honestly came on a little bit last year, more so than Alfred Collins. But Collins is another guy. Just believe that you're the best player on the field and go. Don't think. Stop thinking so much. Yeah. I mean, get your work in, get all of your technique work in so that by the time you line up on Saturdays, you're just ready to rip. And, that's the guy who overthinks, but that light can come on. We saw it for Moro Ojimo. We saw it for Keandre Coburn. Coburn, his first few years at Texas looked like he was just trying to, clog up traffic. Last year, he's pushing guys backwards and really disruptive. And that's the next step for these, these guys that we just mentioned. And it sounds like it's coming, and that's going to be a big position of strength for Texas. And that's what the old school Texas teams had, was a dominant defensive line that could make you one-dimensional, rush, stop the run on the way to the passer. And that's the kind of stuff that that they're looking for in 2023.
Yeah, for sure. And Justice Finkley and Jamon Tapp were actually some guys too that Steve Sarkisian mentioned by name of who could, play the jack type of role at the front of the defense there. He also talked about, they're not really pigeonholing guys into just playing one or the other. They're trying to just see, who can step up and play anywhere on the defensive line. But those were two guys he said have taken a step forward this, going into the 2023 year. Also, Ethan Burke was also one. He said that he looks like a different guy. They've got really high expectations for Colton Vasek, the early enrollee true freshman who came out of the Westlake, a local kid here. So Jure Bledsoe, also, he was another one that said that he is flex force for the defensive line. So this is a really, big development, I would say, and probably a little bit of a surprise when you do lose the production that Texas lost in Moro Ojimo and Keandre Coburn, who were, very veteran players and leaders on that team.
Yeah, and on the other side of the line, we've got a comment here from DJ Dog 31. Want to see DJ Campbell take that starting guard position and run with it, and by all accounts, that's happening. So DJ Campbell is working at right guard where Cole Hudson started every game last fall. Cole Hudson out with the shoulder surgery for the spring. He'll be back for fall camp, but they need depth at that position. They need to have, they need to be too deep at every position. And DJ Campbell, we know his upside is tremendous. And he's just, you watch him walk by you, and he has just got oak trees for legs. He's got that base that you love. It's just hard to move. And he's another guy who just needs to let it go, just make sure your technique work is in and then go. And not think, because if you think you're going to get caught and the defense is going to trick you, and you're going to second guess yourself, and it's not going to go well. And that's why you look at a guy like Kelvin Banks and Cole Hudson and, some of these young guys who played last year, and you're just like, man, that's special. Yeah. And they got more on the way. I mean, like you said, Connor Stroh and some of these massive freshmen who are, probably not going to be counted on here in 2023. That's in the good old days as offensive linemen, you came in, you redshirted so that you could get in the weight program, get your body right, get all the technique down, and then grow together. Because Texas has brought in talented classes in numbers. And when you can bring in 4 guys or 5 guys who are going to grow together through their college experience, develop that bond, that's when, the magic happens on the offensive line. So I think right now the progress report for DJ Campbell is really positive.
Yeah, and you want that. You want to, as you said, you want to be able to try to redshirt offensive linemen if you could. Kyle Flood said he had never been in a position in his career where he had to rely on 2 true freshman offensive linemen, or I think he even said, or 1 true freshman, being kind of in a position where you have to. He said that at the Alamo Bowl. And that's not just coincidental. That's usually what you want. But yeah, there's some big guys here. I'm looking at the roster here, the early enrollee freshman offensive linemen that Texas signed in the 2023 class are all on campus. I believe every single one of them is, right? That they signed all linemen, which is a good thing.
Yeah. Well, there was one offensive lineman who didn't.
Okay, so 4 of what?
So 4 of the 5, yeah.
Yeah, but there's, heights and weights here. Peyton Kirkland, 6'6", 367 pounds. Jaden Chapman, 6'4", 299 pounds. Andre Kojo, 6'6", 358. Connor Stroh, 6'7", 365. Those are some, when Steve Sarkisian talks about big humans, those are some big humans that Texas has. And the more that they are in the college strength program, the better and the bigger probably, and maybe lean muscle, and they can not gain a ton of weight, but these are the guys that they talk about when they want to, add big humans. And then you look even on the defensive line, Sadir Mitchell. That guy is massive. I mean, he's 6'6". They have him listed, I think, at 359, and he's a big boy. You see him out there, and you're like, that kid's like 17. Is this serious? It's like,
Yeah.
I want to see your parents, see like what type of breeding they have there, because my goodness, that's a big guy.
And those are the hardest guys to find. And those are
Mhm.
the guys that Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State have been able to find year in and year out in recruiting. And now Texas is in that mix because Tavondre Sweat is a guy whose stock is rising. And I wrote about Sweat in the Insider, um, recently. He's a guy who got frustrated with all the defensive changes. He had that shoulder injury that caused him to miss spring right when Sark and that staff took over. He was frustrated, didn't play as well as he could have in 21, but really started to come on last year in his second year with Bo Davis. And now, the word is he's ready to play at an all conference type level. Well, no better time than the present, because he's got the body, he's got the NFL frame, and he's a guy who, the players will listen to. So I think he's one of the most important players on this team this year, is Tavondre Sweat, in my opinion, because he's that guy you can't move and should be able to collapse pockets like Keandre Coburn did last year. So he's a guy you got to watch and have high hopes for.
Yeah, and 3 different defensive coordinators in 3 years is absurd. I mean, I don't think that is talked probably enough about. I mean, that, when you see the improvement on the Texas defense last year, and the consistency of the staff is huge. I mean, you can't overlook it. And having 3 different coordinators, I don't even care if they run the exact style of defense. It's still different. You still have to get used to, a different voice, different. A lot of things are different when coaches come in and coordinators come in, especially not just the scheme specifically. But yeah, he was a guy, Sark hasn't really hidden the fact that it was hard for him to be on his 3rd defensive coordinator in 3 years, and, a new position coach too. But I agree with you. The more he comes on, the better it is for Texas, because Tavondre Sweat's been a guy that I remember the first fall camp practice that he was at as a true freshman, or before his true freshman season. It was when they were at the intramural fields when Tom Herman was the head coach. I was just like, gosh, that is a massive person. And it was a true freshman at the time. He's only gotten bigger, stronger, faster. I mean, this guy has a lot of upside, as you said, Chip, and can be the one that can step in and really take over for Keandre Coburn and the production that Texas lost with him going to the NFL.
He can make himself a lot of money this year,
Mm-hmm.
because those defensive tackles, man, they're hard to find. Everyone, you look at Jalen Carter from Georgia, and he's a top 5 pick. It's because he can do it all. He can stop the run, he can rush the passer, he can split double teams, and that's what it takes to make the big money. And T Sweat has that ability. So big year for him. I love this from our man Frank Declouet. Love it or leave it. Does Sorrell get 9.5 sacks? He needs to be at 10 sacks. I was talking to my man Sam Acho about this. People forget Sam had 10 sacks in his last year with the Longhorns, and I think Sorrell's ready. I think he had 5.5 last year. I think he's ready to turn it loose this year. I'm gonna love this. I think he finishes with 10 in 23.
That would be good. Yeah, you're right. He led the team in sacks last year with 5.5. You hope to see that, right? I mean, you want to see that progression year in and year out from guys that are, young, raw talent as they start developing and maturing. And that would be big. I can't remember. When was the last time Texas had someone on defense with 10 sacks?
Yeah, it's been too long, and that's unfortunate. I look at I look at Barron Sorrell, and then, I keep hearing about Anthony Hill, that he's a guy you can put, as a rusher off the edge, like what they did with DeMarvion Overshone, and that this guy has natural lean and has always had a knack for knocking the ball out of the quarterback's hands, that he doesn't just go for the sack. He makes sure to swat at the ball while he's wrapping the quarterback. And Anthony Hill's got a big learning curve as a freshman, but he's a talented dude and his motor does not stop. So if I had to pick a guy who could maybe wiggle in there in the sack department, maybe grab 5 sacks, Anthony Hill, freshman,
Yeah.
watch out.
Interesting. Yeah.
And yes, Raymond Smith, Hill and the Hawaii freshman, Leonga Lafau. I'm hearing great things about Leonga Lafau, that this guy, great instincts, loves football, just eats, drinks, and sleeps it, the preparation. I think Texas is going to be okay at that middle linebacker position, because you've got Leonga Lafau who can play the middle. You've got Anthony Hill who can play the middle. Obviously, they can also, play the weak side, strong side. Hill probably a little better on the strong side, but I think they've hit some gold in this linebacker recruiting class. Darian Gallette's been banged up, so he's not going full speed. And then, they get Samaje Burrell in the summer. But from what they've seen from Hill and Leonga Lafau, they feel like they got a couple players right there. Yeah. And that's big news, because we've talked about how that linebacker position has been a bit of a mystery at times.
Yeah, and the fact that those two are on campus, as early enrollees is big too. And Raymond did say was a Menahue maybe the last with 10 sacks. He had 9.5, so he's the closest to it, 9.5 in the 2018 season. So it's been a while since Texas has had a guy, approach that 10 sack number in a season.
Yeah, and they need it. They used to have a bunch of them.
Yeah.
Sergio Kindle, Sam Acho. They need to have those guys ready and crawling over each other to get there. And I think, Alfred Collins, he's a guy who can certainly do it. Mm-hmm. We just got to see him just rip people apart and just know that all this training, all this work he's put in, he's ready. And to just, go forward and conquer, because he could be a breakout guy this year with that body, 6'5", 305, long arms. That's what the NFL likes. There was a guy named Tyus Bowser at Houston who sort of came on in his final year at Houston and went way over double-digit sacks and ended up being a, first day pick in the NFL draft. I mean, that's the kind of, you could see something like that for Alfred Collins if he just, keeps that light bulb on and doesn't get frustrated. Just, put blinders on and go.
Yeah. I mean, we've been waiting for that ever since that breakout performance in the Alamo Bowl. We've been waiting for it to continue, and it hasn't yet. And I think with this roster, Chip, this is where you can get overlooked too if it doesn't turn on with the way that Texas is recruiting at defensive line especially. But yeah, I mean, I'm waiting for it. I've wanted to see it since that Alamo Bowl game. And now is definitely the time, I think, for him.
And you're going to rotate guys at that position. Mm-hmm. You just are. The big guys are good 6 plays at a time, then get them out, get them a rest, bring in the next, set of tackles. And Texas has been aggressive in rotating guys, and Alfred Collins has played. He just hasn't made that impact. And, when you're a top level player, you can come in, the down and distance, the call. If you've been paying attention during the game, what the offensive line tendencies are. You go in with your plan and you go. And that's where, Alfred Collins had to wait his turn, because he's been behind Moro Ojimo. He's been behind, Byron Murphy and even Vernon Broughton, and now it's time. So um, you'd hate to see Alfred Collins go through his time at Texas and not be an impact guy with the production that he had coming out of high school, that frame. And he got caught up in the coaching changes too. He got frustrated. I mean, it was the same thing for him with Tavondre Sweat, with all the changes on the defensive side, the defensive line. But now it's time.
Yeah, for sure. And it's been 10 years, Chip, since Texas has had 10 sacks. And that was actually 2013. They had two guys that hit the 10 or more. It was Jackson Jeffcoat had 13, and then Cedric Reed had 10. So it's time again. Come on.
10 years.
10 years. Man, we're getting old. I'm like, I covered Texas back then.
Yeah. Jackson Jeffcoat just, he's like getting ready to retire from the Canadian Football League. Yeah. Some interesting comments over here. I think talking about Jamon Tap is a guy who has got a lot of ability. He's got to show he can set the edge, and that's where everyone gets kind of seduced by the pass rushing ability, but can they set the edge? Can they get rid of a offensive tackle or get upfield of an offensive tackle to make sure that a run gets forced back inside? Because if you can't set the edge, you're never going to get a chance to rush the passer. They're just going to run the football right by you. And that's where I think they have to have someone who can set the edge in the run and rush the passer. So,
yeah.
Well, Taylor, I think this has been a great hour of interaction with our listeners. And you see any? Let's see if there's one more nugget.
There's a question about the first scrimmage. I'm not sure exactly what the scrimmage situation is going to be. Texas is off this week for spring break. They will return, and then they'll have, I believe, 4 more weeks of practices. But I think there's only 3 per week, and then the spring game. Do you know when the first scrimmage is?
Well, the spring is different from fall camp.
Mm-hmm.
When in fall camp, the scrimmages are every
Saturday.
week. The first 3 Saturdays of fall camp. In spring, it's different. And someone asked in here about Jalen Catalon. Is he practicing? He's practicing, but he's got a green jersey. They're being careful with him. They don't want to have anything happen to where he's out to injury before the season. Now, they know he can tackle. They know what he's about. They're trying to make sure that his shoulders is strong and healthy as possible, so that when you get to the fall, he's ready to go. And at that point, he would definitely take part in the live contact, parts of practice. But they're not gonna risk injury with him in the spring. That's for sure. And they love his leadership, and they know what he can do. Everyone's seen his film. He was an all SEC freshman at Arkansas. So, he's at practice, but he's not participating in the contact portion of practice. We'll see if that changes. I mean, obviously, if the medical team feels like he's up for it and everything's great, and they want to take it for a test drive, great. But I doubt we'll see a lot of contact. Everyone will get to see for themselves on April 15th in the orange-white game if he's a full participant in that game or not. But I'm excited about what Jalen Catalon can bring to this defense as well.
Yeah.
Taylor, good stuff. We appreciate everybody for tuning in to this live episode. It's becoming a regular on Mondays to do the live Flagship Podcast. Take your questions, be interactive. Lots going on, obviously, with the men and women in the NCAA Tournament. with spring football resuming after this week. So make sure you're over at horns247.com and make sure you're subscribed to the Horns 27 YouTube channel. Just hit that subscribe button right there on your screen. And for Taylor Estes, I'm Chip Brown. Until next time, we'll see you over at horns247.com. Until then, stay safe and keep the faith.